and welcome to Web3 Unpacked. I'm Rich Pasqua, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Lloyd Moore, CTO of Valence, a very interesting platform that offers Web3 benefits and capabilities to Web2 commerce. Welcome, Lloyd.
Hey, Rich, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Lloyd. And, from what I've been reading and hearing from other people in the industry, you have a pretty interesting background. You're a technology executive. You served as commando in the Royal Marines, and you're a professional rugby player. And from what our brief conversation just before we started, you're an avid music fan and producer, playing piano and getting into the electronic stuff that I love too. How did you actually get involved in Web3? This is a question we ask, but you have such a diverse background, it becomes even more interesting for me.
Yeah, so, and by the way, the rugby thing, I don't play rugby anymore. I'm 52 now. I would be seriously hurt if I ventured onto a rugby pitch right now. But
That's
yeah,
totally respectable right there. I get it.
yeah, but to answer the Web3 question, that came around from a combination of things, really. So from an early age, I've been a huge maths fan, which is a bit rare, even, especially at a young age. But if you combine my love of electronics and hardware and software, that combination around, I'd say, a few years after the original Bitcoin paper, I'd heard kind of ruminations about how cool Bitcoin was, and then fast forward to maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when all these other cryptocurrencies exploded, and I just started to think about just some of the amazing things that suddenly were possible in this brand new world of Web3. And I've not looked back, and here we are.
Yeah, many people back in 2013, I started in this world and never left. Did the same thing you did, read the white paper, had some discussions, with technologists and technology folks that I was working with at the time, and kept talking about it and realized it's undeniably interesting, the idea of introducing truth into the digital world, into the web. That sparked my curiosity. Invested a little bit. Things go up, things go down. Threw up a bunch of times, when the prices go down. Um, but ultimately, just a little bit of investment keeps your interest peaked, and then you really start to follow the rabbit hole, and you start to tell yourself and really understand that this technology has the power to transform society. So
Absolutely.
really cool. Similar stories. Um, so one of the questions I like to ask, most of our guests is, what do you think, generally, even, outside of your world of Valiance, what are the hurdles and the obstacles, for organizations and people building for Web3 currently?
I think the main obstacles are understanding what the heck this stuff does, because if you compare the kind of things you can do with Web3 to the landscape that we're in right now, there's there's a lack of understanding. For example, if you talk about things like zero knowledge proofs, that is a very difficult beast to explain to anybody that doesn't have a deep understanding of mathematics and some of the other things that you can do that don't even come close to the power of zero knowledge. Imagine trying to explain to somebody that I can prove a fact to you without revealing anything other than something that's going to make you trust my answer. That's already, it's even difficult to say that's that statement. So yeah, I'd say that the main the main difficulty is getting people on board just through education and explaining just what the how powerful this new technology is and this group of components.
Yeah, education, and it comes up almost in every podcast, Lloyd. The education is kind of the backbone of everything right now. Until people can really jump that chasm, really jump that, you know, that mental type of scenario of wow, things can be trusted. You don't have to do an hour's worth of research on someone or something or service. That's super powerful, but it's really hard for people to kind of get over it and get into it. Once you start to understand and you start to trust the technology and you see that it works by example or use case, that's super powerful. And that's how people really get into it. And that's the importance of this podcast, to be honest with you, is to show that there are real people, really smart people, starting to structure their businesses in a much different way, whether it be pure play, DeFi, or offering rewards points and systems through Web3. You start to see that there are real people, real teams, and global teams building something really special. And it's interesting, when with all this stuff with the SEC in the United States, which, hello UK, you guys have dodged a bullet there. Let's put it that way. Um, it's interesting to see, the dynamics happening with that, and how things are going to unfold in that world as well.
Indeed.
But yeah, so before we get into Valiance per se, I want to know a little bit of what problems is Valiance solving for people in web and potential Web3 and potentially outside of Web3.
So the way I'd answer this question is just explain the separation from Web3 as almost like an implementation detail of the wider problem that we're solving. So, as a lot of people are aware, data has become prevalent in every aspect of our lives as people become much more comfortable with technology, or at least the things that rely on technology, such as my iPhone or my laptop that's in front of me right now. A big part of what makes these things valuable is the data, the information that's flowing from my laptop, my iPhone right now, to the nearest broadcasting uh, station to you know and then to the ISPs and so on. And this is all happening at a rate of knots that most people wouldn't be able to fathom. So where Web3 comes in is partly through democratizing the ownership of that data. So, for example, if I wanted to understand what data is on my phone and who's got access to it, that's pretty much impossible for most people. And so, what our platform is going to do is it's going to enable through data ownership, big players and small players, depending on the different phases, to have the ability to provide access to different levels of data, whether it's a single piece of data or whether it's all of my health data, for example, in a way that's trusted. And the way we'll do that is by leaning on Web3 and specifically blockchain. Instead of people having to trust Valence as an organization, they will be able to trust the mathematics behind the technology that is blockchain itself. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Fantastic. And, the idea of data, right? And who owns the data and who does what with data obviously is a huge conversation. But my wife and I, she's in ad tech and marketing. We've been having this discussion for years, right? And I keep telling her, blockchain is the way, blockchain is the way. Now you're starting to see ad tech companies doing almost not a Web3 or a blockchain solutions, but they're handling user data and advertising data in a decentralized way, even though it's not on the blockchain. So to me, that's actually a great step forward. And it's the idea of what I really like what you guys are doing is taking, much like Brave Browser, taking this whole wacky world of misuse of data and putting the onus, putting the ownership back into the user's hands, right? That is super important for people to understand that companies like Valiance and others are doing this, starting to or already doing it, which means you are no longer the product, and you become the advertiser. You become the arbiter of what is used and not used and controlled. And I can envision a lot of this stuff with, switches and dials, and you can turn up, personal data or turn it down, or social data or whatever it may be, and use that as currency. You know, um, people, large organizations, no names included here, have been using millions of people as batteries and or content creators. So I love the idea that, and I really like that even on your website, on the Valence website, you break things into products. And I think people understand productization of technologies like this a little bit better, which is identity, authentication, and engagement, right? And those ideas come in the form of the wallet, the Valiance identity, and Valiance Marketplace, which is super interesting, and I really want to get into that. But can you kind of unpack these products for us? Give us a taste of what people will experience and or benefit from.
Yeah, so you mentioned the wallet. So for those people that don't really know, in the Web3 world, if you think about something like a password, whenever you're logging into a browser, you're basically typing something in, and some information goes from your phone or from your laptop to a server somewhere. But along the way, there is a chance that, a naughty person could intercept that signal, and now there's an insecurity issue because somebody could discover your password. Now, there's things in place to mitigate that problem, but when we think about wallets, there's this concept of a public and private key pair. And the way that works is the public key is shared with everybody, and that's not a problem. But the private key is always kept private. And so what happens is, through some technology technology handshakes, your private key essentially never leaves your wallet. And so that's how our wallet works as well. But something a bit more interesting from a value proposition point of view with Valence is that traditionally it's been quite difficult to use a wallet using this technology. And what Valence is always endeavoring to do is to make it as seamless as possible. So eventually somebody will be able to use our whole stack without any knowledge of how any of these different blockchain-esque components work. So that's our wallet. The concept of valence identity, that's talking about control over your personal data, and it's an important discussion that's been happening, and we've just touched on it there. And you mentioned and then just tell me, there was a couple other things that you mentioned, but I've forgotten what you said after that. Yeah, so if you kind of expand on the idea of the wallet and treat the wallet as a component, and now you add more layers to that, I guess it's analogous to a physical wallet that people more that can identify with more. And let's say you were putting somebody's logo on your personal wallet, and now if you transpose that into the digital world, that's probably the closest analogy I could give you. So, for example, if you take a vertical like art, we can configure the wallet in different ways so that, if you're an art lover or a collector and so on, there's different configurations that we'll eventually be able to install so that your wallet feels more like something that's designed for that particular sphere or for that particular vertical, which is not something that you can do with I was going to say traditional, but with a normal PKI Web3 wallet.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very good. So there's going to be, we always like to look for opportunities, right? To make connections with brands, have marketing capabilities, advertising capabilities for different people. If you choose, right? It's your wallet, so you're having control over your data and how you perceive that wallet. So there could be revenue generating opportunities right in your wallet, actually. So that's kind of cool. Now, from a just jumping back to the identity portion of it, because this is so interesting, and I've played and teased out blockchain or Web3 type of scenarios for very large publishers many years ago.
Yeah.
And you can imagine the idea of, decentralized micropayments went straight over their heads at the time, 6-7 years ago. And I'm curious as to how you foster the relationships with people outside of the Valence network, say publishers or advertisers or anyone else. Are you starting to make those connections right now where, they're part of the trusted network, or they're out of our network, but they still can play and we can still transact? How does that work?
No, that's a great question. So I'll just take a step back, and then we'll build up to the point where we talk about interoperability, because that's the cornerstone of getting to that place where you can break out of your ecosystem. So once you've got a Web3 identity on chain, that becomes the fundamental aspect of your kind of representation in the decentralized internet. And so there's several advantages to that. So before you get to interoperability, you've got self-sovereignty. So, by minting that identity on chain, it means that you, effectively, because you've got the private key, you control your own identity. So in the traditional web, or for this conversation, we'll say Web2, your identities, like, your user accounts on different platforms, we won't name them, but they're controlled by these centralized entities. And the problem with that is, although it's really easy to use, if those same entities shut down, or for whatever reason decide to block you for some reason, you've lost your identity. Now, in Web3, as long as you control your private keys, nobody can take that away from you. And also there's the privacy and transparency aspect as well, because on-chain identities can offer that balance between privacy and transparency. If you're able to control what can be seen, when, and how, you can choose how transparent you want different aspects of things that you own to be. And while your interactions on chain are by default publicly viewable, they're not directly tied to who you are in the real world unless you choose to make that link. Now, with all that in place, we can now talk about interoperability, which in the Web3 model, because your identity is not tied to a particular platform or service, it is now possible to go beyond that ecosystem, whatever it is, and interop with all these other different ecosystems. So the way that it works now, let's say you were in a particular forum, or could be Twitter, could be something else. You're effectively held to ransom within that walled garden. But now with this and with NFTs and things like that, and we can talk about that, you can now essentially take your digital representation, which is that identity on chain, and have it reach out without restriction wherever you may want it to go.
Yeah, I love that analogy of interacting with Twitter. Whether you're doing a micropayment or you want to tip someone, or you really love some of the writers on there or whatnot. Really interesting, and I think the world of interoperability or multi-chain, if you will. Years ago we started with single chains. Things blew up, they broke, and people took lessons from it. I know this happened across the Cosmos ecosystem, and people and protocols started to band together and make
Yeah.
decisions as a group, not just individuals. And they realized they needed to support each other. They needed to build and piggyback on each other. And it
Well,
becomes a very safe and open way to transact.
absolutely. And so just to use another example of, so, before we talked about things that might not be possible today, but in the Web3 world become possible. The other day I was talking to my wife about a playlist that I had on Spotify. And, in the car, I wanted to play that same playlist, but I was listening to Apple Music. Now, if you can completely decouple that playlist, give it its own identity, I can now play that in any other forum, whether it's Apple Music, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Audius. And then suddenly, and as you educate people about these possibilities, you now empower people to come up with even more interesting ways. And that's just a really simple example. And that ability to be interoperable across different fields is super powerful. And I think that over the coming months and years, we're going to see an explosion of ideas that are going to change the way people live.
I couldn't agree more. That I'm slightly chuckling at the Apple analogy because they are so walled off that I don't know if they understand the word interoperability or sharing, if you will. All good. We still like Apple. Blah blah blah. But there are lessons to be learned, and I think this is one of those things that the world, not just big business or big tech, have to learn. Everyone has to learn that we're opening up. Humans are opening up. It's about
Absolutely.
sharing and making money from it, or getting knowledge from it, or anything else. And there is a real sharing community baked into the whole ethos of Web3. So I love that. I love the playlist analogy. How many times do we think about that? Like in the car, in the office. I wish I can sling that here, or interact with that, or I collected all of this here and I want to share it, in a different place. It's frustrating, but it's refreshing to know that this technology will allow for that.
Absolutely.
If the organization accepts it, Um, awesome. Now the third component here is the marketplace, right? Authenticating. One of the things that you're doing is authenticating physical and digital goods, right? And I don't think this is anything new to the world of Web3, but how are you guys putting your spin on it? Thinking beyond NFTs and taking smart contracts to new industries. What does that world look like in your marketplace?
Yeah, so I think everybody understands the basic, premise of a marketplace. It's a market, buyers and sellers and so on. But it comes from, rather, the value proposition at Valence comes from not just the marketplace per se, but again, looking at interoperability, the use of blockchain, and added to that, we've got a component which is AliceNet, which is our own blockchain as well. And so when you couple that marketplace with the concept of tokenomics, when you've got your own blockchain that consists of two different tokens, one being the utility, one for governance, suddenly you have a traditional marketplace, but with all the facets of Web3, that when you bring these two things together, there's some interesting things that you will be able to do in that marketplace that you couldn't do before. So think about a marketplace where you've got something to sell, or you want to reach out to people to say that, you're interested in, product A, B, or C, something that you can't do today, but you will be able to with Valence and Web3 in general, is you will be able to choose who can see those signals of interest. So, for example, I can be on a marketplace using blockchain technology, not having to trust even Valence, and advertise based on particular profiles that I'm interested in a particular thing, but do it either publicly or privately or somewhere in between. This is not something that you could do in a traditional marketplace, but something that Valence is moving towards.
Interesting. So you could set up a shop. You do your own marketing research and due diligence. You identify core audiences or targets that you're going after. You start selling your wares or your goods. Then you have the ability again to kind of share that marketing data. Now it's not personal data. It's marketing data around specific goods and services to other marketing and advertising agencies or networks.
Absolutely.
That's really cool, and that's a kind of a fresh spin
Yeah,
on
totally. And
on data.
also, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's also the fact that you do not have to trust as much. So, for example, if I go onto another marketplace, let's say Amazon, for example, if I want to get a feel for how good a particular product or service is, I'm going to go and look at the comments. But now imagine that I can go to another marketplace, and instead of looking at comments, I can see real data that cannot be faked. This is something that can easily be done with blockchain, that can't be done when you need to trust the platform that you're seeing this thing on.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially when it comes to the world of Amazon, because I know a lot of like affiliate marketing people and people spinning up new products. The first thing they'll do is go on. They'll do exactly what you said. Look at the comments. How are people? How is the environment resonating with these people or these products? But then they'll also go and look at how many units were sold over how long. But at the end of the day, maybe the amount of units is factual, but the comments generally are, in most cases, fabricated, right? And you don't know what's real or not. Look, we live in a world of bots. So the idea of just, validating that data, having it super clean, and then having actual advertisers come in and start to use it. And then there'll be a new layer of tools for them to parse and source for themselves beyond that, which is super, super interesting. So your technology is going to lead to other layers of really interesting marketing and advertising technology. Very cool. And that's something that I would love to unpack and kind of discuss even further down the road for sure. Awesome. Now, within the marketplace, it looks like, Valiance will be able to tie into your kind of traditional CRM, or as we were just saying, maybe there is a new generation of CRM. I hope there is. Personally, I'm not a big fan of what's out there right now, but how does the world of what is, when we hear digital twin, right? I'm working with a couple of ESG companies right now, and they're doing, building these data and information centers and dashboards that monitor the eco health of skyscrapers or apartment buildings and or office buildings in maybe in London or New York or wherever. And they're creating digital twins. So people can actually see environments. They can see how the HVAC system's working or anything else, or even flow in and out of buildings. What does this mean to the Valiance world as far as digital twins?
Yeah, it's a great question. Digital twins is super fascinating. I think
Yeah.
depending on the audience, somebody could think of a digital twin as an NFT. and then there's also a close coupling in other instances with things like IoT. So you mentioned there the example of HVAC. If I've got the ability to show live data from an object that I've got in my hand or at home, and then have that information reflect in a digital system, using your example, I can now very easily track the movements of um, through the events that are being sent by IoT of that particular system as a digital twin to that kind of like digital space. So also analogous is the NFTs as well. Once you've got the concept of being able to track things in a digital world, whether it be physical or not, whether it be an NFT, it's now possible to use a digital platform in a CRM or otherwise to do things like trading. So you could use that digital twin concept to trade on the Valence marketplace, but I'm biased, or other similar platforms. And what would this allow? It would allow retailers to sell their goods in different digital markets because of the interoperability. And with a CRM integration, Valence could also integrate with other CRM systems. The NFTs could also be linked to, for example, different profiles of customers in the CRM system as well. And for the good or bad, that would allow companies to track things like ownership and history of their products at the customer level. And these are things that can be done with some difficulty, but with the Web3 space and the components that it offers, this kind of suite of products that are available today that are just going to get better in the future, this becomes, dare I say it, child's play for organizations. And then, this word keeps coming up, interoperability. For the Valence marketplace to extend its reach beyond its own ecosystem, that interop element is key. It means that different blockchain platforms can exchange information. And I keep repeating the word, and then you suddenly understand why that interoperability is so fundamental for nearly everything that comes from here in the future. And it all starts with having these basic components in place. One of those things being the digital identity, which we spoke about earlier. Overall, the potential applications of a platform like Valence Marketplace, they're vast. They're vast.
Yeah, and the thing that you mentioned, Lloyd, that really should pique people's interest is that you could track your products in perpetuity, meaning forever,
Yes.
with, again, interoperability happening, meaning if a product or a digital asset jumps to a different chain or whatever, you can still track it. That is wildly powerful. That's
Absolutely.
that's actually unheard of, because we've been living in just this kind of faux Web2 physical world for so long. But when you set a product free and it's tagged and set up properly and with the right technology, being able to track the legacy, the performance and legacy of your products over time across multiple platforms is wild. It's a really cool concept, and I think that's part of the thing, that mental jump that people have to kind of make.
Absolutely.
And once advertisers see this, it becomes really powerful.
So what you touched on there is, in the art world, you would call it provenance. And so one of the first verticals that we're working in, because of our strong relationships in the art world, is art. And using blockchain technology, you touched on a really important point there, which is, in of itself, it's super valuable to be able to trace the movements of any product. Now imagine that you're an art collector. what Valence will do is allow you as an art collector to track the provenance of pieces of artwork that you're either looking to buy or that you own, or even just for historical interest, be able to watch these movements. And even just on that latter point, you've now got another avenue into things like speculation and financial instruments, buying and selling, and now you've got this trusted platform which is built on these trustless components, inevitably blockchain, and then suddenly in the world of art there's new instruments that will come up just because of things like the Valence platform and others that will follow.
Mm. Yeah, and it's no matter, whenever you're talking marketplaces and smart contracts and whatnot, NFTs in art always come up, right? And provenance and all that good stuff. What are you making? How is the marketplace, the Valiance marketplace right now, as far as adoption of, say, normie brands, or physical products and or normal digital products outside of the NFT art world?
So interestingly enough, we took the stance that even though we are interested because of our relationships with particular verticals, we made a we made a decision to make sure that our initial platform was broad, so that we weren't pigeonholed in any particular vertical, and this would be something that we could underpin lots of different verticals. So in general, what we're building is a data enablement platform that, although through the examples we've just discussed, are super useful and valuable for different people and profiles within the world of art, that there is also a strong link to the use cases that you'll find in the world of health, for example, as well. And so what we have in place right now, and we continue to develop, could underpin not just art but health and sports and other verticals in between.
That's fantastic, and it's important for people to understand that all they hear is Bored Apes and this, that, and the other thing, and NFTs, but companies and organizations like Valiance are starting to open up this world of commerce to many, many other products and services. And you're taking a kind of a data first kind of approach to things, which I think is really smart, because that's where the value lies. And it can be monetized by as many people or as few people at whenever you want. It's really amazing. And it's important for our listeners to really understand that when the floodgates open up, and they will, and people start using their tokens, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any other altcoin, on various networks to spend their money and to use it, the floodgates are going to open up, and having the right, commerce backbone and infrastructure is really important. And again, interoperability key here. It's important that it is coming, and there is an entire massive groundswell and commerce wave coming. So people really have to understand that, and it is this. It's already happening. There is an underground economy. People and governments don't understand that your decisions up here reflect thousands of protocols, thousands of other developers and products down the road that are building and trust this whole idea, and it's coming. What now? Those are the three core products. Do you have products that you're bubbling up? You want to tease out, Lloyd? Something fresh that we might want to kind of keep our eye on with Valiance.
So we also have, within engineering, we have the concept of science and research, and we have some amazing people who are constantly looking at pushing the boundaries. We're looking at innovative ways of using zero knowledge to do things that you can't readily do today. Earlier, we talked about giving permissions to some or all of somebody's data. Something that we're developing right now is the ability using fine-grained permissions based on not any database technology, but zero knowledge proofs, using some serious mathematics to enable people to not just be able to have fine-grained permissions and control over their data at any time at will, but to be able to do it in a trustless way, which means even though the front door to that technology will be Valence as a company, they will be able to publicly see the technology, through a block explorer or something similar. And even if said person was to, fall out with Valence or decide to not want to work with Valence, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't change their abilities to trust their data. And so things like that, we're really looking forward to releasing, hopefully in Q4, but we'll see.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things in the 2.0 world where you kind of join a community, you download some software that you want to use, or you're paying for it, a subscription, but then you get locked in, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the whole, everyone, all software companies are in their own, subscriptions slash walled gardens, if you will. And that's the idea of making money. You can't fault them. That's how it's done. But being able to move and slice off pieces of earnings and or data or knowledge as it lives, even outside of the ecosystem that you started in, is super powerful, and I think that's something new for humans. Especially in the software world. And I can say I completely welcome it. I think it's a very trustless kind of environment, and definitely welcomed. So, Lloyd, we kind of unpacked Valiance, and its subsequent products quite a bit here. Really, really interesting. But there's another side to you personally that is kind of near and dear to you, and that's kind of the idea of being a coach or a leader, and helping people with leadership skills and vision. So how do you help organizations kind of find their way, maybe help them realign their purpose, if you will? How are you doing that?
So, just to talk about leadership specifically, what I try to do is foster this idea that, whenever you go into an organization as a leader, you need to change the way people think about leadership. And that is the key to success from a team standpoint is to have a team of leaders. And so if you kind of flip that kind of hierarchical tree around, it's my belief that leaders are there to serve the people that are, visually, on that tree underneath them. And so what I try to do is first, as part of the culture, help people understand that they're not there to follow, but they are there to lead themselves and to lead their efforts as part of the the company mission. And also, it's key to understand that effective leadership, it's not just about qualifications on paper or personal connections, but it involves hands-on experience and a deep understanding of the intricacies of an organization. One good thing about being old, I'm 50. I'll be 53. I'll be 53 in July. Is that one thing that you can't buy. You can't buy experience. And so, and what that then hopefully gives you is authentic understanding. So hands-on leaders rather understand that they need to understand the work that their teams are doing as well. It's quite difficult to effectively lead somebody if you don't understand what it feels like to do the very thing that you're asking them to do. Um, and then that helps you make informed decisions, offer practical guidance, and it also helps gain the respect of the team members as well. Empathy, massive. Leaders with hands-on experience, they're often better able to empathize with their team's challenges and successes because they've faced those situations themselves. And having that empathy fosters a stronger connection between leaders and teams. It's really important to remember, and it's very easy to forget, the fact that regardless of the organization, regardless of the nature of the work that's being done, it's about people. And that's why empathy and emotional intelligence are so important. Without that, you're sorry, please continue. Yeah, it's really easy to understand things from a technical aspect, but if you're not engaged at the emotional level with people, you never have those relationships, and whichever team that you're on, it's going to be formed on a brittle backbone, and you're probably set up to fail. Um, and then also credibility is really important as well. A lot of these things kind of overlap as well. Credibility, authenticity, and so on. But hands-on leaders earn credibility because they can demonstrate that they're not only capable of leading but also of doing as well, and that translates into we spoke about respect. It's increased from their team members, and there's a greater willingness of the team to kind of join the efforts that they're being asked to go along. And then the last thing I'd say, and there's loads of different ones I can speak about, but pragmatism. With that hands-on experience, you make more pragmatic decisions based on reality, not a textbook. It's very easy for people to go into organizations and take their past learnings, if you like, and try to impose that reality into their new situation without proper experience and failures as well, and learning what doesn't work. It's very difficult to properly apply previous learnings to new situations. I'll stop
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well said, well said. And I agree with all of that. Specifically the emotional intelligence portion of it. There's learnt skills and tools that to your last point, that you as a manager or a leader bring to the table, but life is not, and products and services are not one size fits all. You have to kind of take a step back, assess your team, assess the situation, assess your go-to-market plan, and really adapt from there, using and pulling. But also for me, what I've learned, and this is to your point again, it comes with being seasoned. It becomes with being experienced, is the idea of fostering a selflessness management style, and kind of pulling your ego back, and letting the smart men and women you hired really do what they want to do, and really push you forward. And then that adds to the whole idea that you brought up, is trust, right? And they see you rolling up your sleeves, so that is a beautiful combination of how to really kind of tie in and speak the same language with your teams. So
Indeed, absolutely.
wonderful. And you often speak about this. So you on circuits? Are you writing books?
Um, I am writing a book. I, I am writing a book, but it's for my daughter. I often will tell her a story when she goes to bed, and she's 8 now. She'll be 9 in September. And a few months ago, my wife and I had the idea that instead of letting those memories go, although I'm still telling the same stories. It would be good to take those stories and put them into a book. So my daughter will say, okay, tell me the story about the dragon and the unicorn. And over time, those same stories have been crystallized. And so I'm almost there. I've got the words, but not the illustrations. And using AI to produce, using Midjourney to produce the illustrations, coming out anytime soon, but probably not for the public.
Yeah, it's a personal project. And you know what? AI is a fun tool, and we could go on and on about that. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
In fact, maybe Valiance is working on, AI capabilities. Most, well, shouldn't say most, but a lot of NFTs or smart contracts are building in not only automation, but predictive learning and modeling on top of that through AI. So that's really cool. And we haven't even scratched the surface of that with Valiance. I'm sure you guys are kind of got your noses north on that one.
We're very interested. We're very interested.
Oh yes, oh yes, and that is as fast as Web3 is moving. AI is like light speed, light speed.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things where most likely we'll be starting a separate podcast just dedicated to the world of AI, how to use it perhaps from an enterprise level to a small business level to a personal level. Everyone is interested, and it's about to get wild.
Absolutely. It's moving
so
it's incredible.
yeah. Even Adobe, which most people don't realize that Adobe has had AI type of image-based tools for many years, but now they're starting to really bubble it up. They're really actually very powerful within Adobe. I've been on the beta for Photoshop and other Firefly and a few other things. It's really powerful, and it's only day one for that. So super exciting. Can't wait. I know you'll probably see another podcast coming out soon. But what do you think? And we touched on this a little bit. Just a little side note here or question. What do you think the roadblocks are for mass adoption and understanding of decentralized networks or Web3?
Yeah, this question comes up a lot. I think it does come down to education, as you rightly said. We did touch on this, and I think that once businesses realize that the value proposition doesn't need to be one way, when both sides of the exchange can get value, I think the minute that happens, as people see more businesses do this and are able to use those same businesses and the products that they produce, I think that those roadblocks will be removed. I also think that we've got a long way to go with things like regulation. It's a brand new space. And once we become, as a society, more mature and have a better understanding in general of the implications of a lot of different things, from AI and Web3 and security models and all the mathematics behind that, I think that suddenly, with that shared understanding, a lot of those roadblocks will be removed. But it starts with education, whether that's on a personal level, which, if I'm honest, probably doesn't scale fast enough. And so we're going to have to rely on those larger entities with that kind of, from that B to B to C model, if you like, to be the gateway drug for that uptake in education. And then those roadblocks will disappear.
Yeah, and some people might say, "Hey, it's a battle between blockchain and non-blockchain," but I kind of I have a similar sentiment of you need 2.0 to get 3.0, right?
Absolutely. Look, today I can point somebody to an application and I can tell them that there's a database behind the website, and they're not going to think twice about that. And I think if I say that there's a blockchain behind the website, there will be more questions. But I think over time we will get to the point where people will think of a database as a blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I see it as the scales will just kind of tip. And, database to me is like, well, that could be anywhere.
Exactly.
It could be doing anything. It could be running any software behind the scenes. But a
Indeed.
blockchain application or DApp or whatever you want to protocols that you're working with, it is in essence a decentralized network and or database, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think the scales will tip, and now it'll be, oh, you're not decentral, you're not a blockchain application. Ooh, that should give you pause if you're not, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the scales
Couldn't
will
agree more.
tip.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, Lloyd, and this could be, this could blow up on us right now, which it probably should, and I'd love to have you back and talk more about this. But what what are the components in the future of DAOs, right, and decentralized networks? Because personally, I am fascinated and love, and I've spun up, and I'm just dipping my toes into starting a decentralized autonomous organization just to try it, with my company and other networks that I'm working with. What are your thoughts on this? Because I think it's profound.
It's a great question. I wish you'd answered. I wish you'd asked me this earlier on. 'Cause now I'm sat thinking like what not to say about DAOs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think the components, today and in the future, there'll be a lot that. So DAOs are all about governance, and I think that we're gonna have, we've got governance models in play today, but in the near future and beyond, we're gonna have advanced governance models. We'll see the emergence, the novel, sophisticated models that potentially will use AI to balance efficiency with decentralization. It's very easy to conceptually imagine things moving at light speed, but Einstein was right, or I think he's still right. Nothing goes faster than the speed of light. This might involve systems that can delegate democracy. Let's call it liquid democracy. And then there's all these other instruments like quadratic voting, prediction markets for decision making. Again, AI, I see AI's involvement there as well. You've also got layer 2 scaling solutions, and then that could be layer 3 and layer 4. I think that's inevitable. People talk a lot about layer 2, but then there's like meta layers that are going to come. And these will be there to support the growth of DAOs and therefore decentralized networks. And those, layer 2 and beyond solutions, they'll be integral. They'll be necessary. Things like optimistic rollups, ZK rollups. I think optimistic rollups are the interim step, and then it will just be ZK rollups and side chains, and that will significantly increase transaction speed. We think of the term ZK, zero knowledge, as being about not giving away secrets or leaking information, but one of the huge benefits is efficiency, increasing speed, because now on the main chain, instead of being in the same time that I can do one transaction, I can do 1,000 or 10,000. And then there's that word again, interoperability, cross-chain interoperability. There'll be lots of that. I won't go into that. I've said interoperability many, many times. And then outside of the technology, there's the legal recognition, I guess, and regulation. Although I don't want to talk about regulation, I'm not a lawyer. That needs to happen. The maturity in that space, and then there'll be enhanced privacy as well. So it will be a non-event to become a part of a DAO. There'll be a lot more education and therefore trust about the efficacy of of DAOs and the various instruments that use them. And I guess it's going to, well, definitely improve inclusion and diversity. And then we'll see, not just in DAOs, but in other areas, more effective measures around security as those DAOs manage significant resources, they'll become more targeted for hackers. And so as we advance in auditing things like smart contracts, formal verification tools, probably going to be built on things like OCaml and Idris, and more efficient bug bounty programs that are probably going to be run by DAOs with AI as members, and insurance protocols. They'll all be crucial in securing those DAOs assets. Yeah, lots of change coming.
It's a pretty heady topic because when you get into the mechanics of it, it is about creating a governance model for a select number of people that then have roles within that organization, right? I think that's going to be a fundamental shift for normal people to get over quicker than, say, people who thirst for control, governments.
Absolutely.
And large, they will. I think that's the next battle, right? So the battle is just, hey, SEC and everyone else, this is legit, and just because you don't have controlling stake over it doesn't mean it's not. DAOs will be the next thing that people start to kind of peel the layers back and start to see, oh my gosh, this is really autonomous. These are communities that are forming and creating their own governance models and rules. I think people will either jump on it 100%, or they will just really question the heck out of it and get really nervous.
Absolutely.
And perhaps scared.
Absolutely.
But it's a hugely powerful thing. And one of the things you brought up within the DAO conversation, which I think is hyper important, is cybersecurity in Web3, DeFi in general, but specifically around DAOs. And I think those types of security measures need to be baked in, because DAOs will, like as we're talking, they're picking up speed. They're going to be more prevalent. I would like to see personally more security measures baked in just by default. So people don't get into trouble, because you can adopt 1,000 bots without knowing it. You can, let people into your communities, and sometimes financial communities, and not know who they are. So validating and adding that layer of security from day one is hyper important, I think. But
so I'm glad you mentioned this, because we are currently working, surprise, surprise, on something that may be of interest, which is if you understand a concept called zero trust architecture, it's where you have a model where you don't rely on things like perimeters, so firewall rules, for example, and instead you accept that somebody or some entity, some hacker, is going to be able to break through those firewalls. And so there's an architecture called zero trust architecture, a way of building things where those different components that are deployed, they look after themselves. And so they have rules baked in to say, okay, wherever I'm deployed, I don't trust the environment that I'm in. So I'm going to have these things, these side chains, whatever, sidecar, baked in, that will validate everything and anything that comes into my particular space. And now I don't need to trust the firewalls. We are thinking about, we're doing a little bit more than thinking. We're thinking about a zero data architecture, where at the data layer, where data becomes available, imagine now that you've got rules baked in, so that regardless of where that data goes or comes from, the data itself is able to reason about the security of the interaction between two parties. And I think that there's, I know there's other people working on this in different ways. And I think that we will see more and more of that over the coming weeks and months.
Awesome. It's funny you say weeks and months, not years, like
Yeah,
normal product life cycles.
Yeah, it's time is different these days.
Good. And I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit more. The whole zero trust idea, fascinating. And again, from cybersecurity to DAOs, we could be on the phone for cameras for ages, but we might have to peel off another session for that. But
Love that.
so as we're kind of winding down a little bit here, Lloyd, what is next for Valence? What's kind of the 2-week, 2-month roadmap for you guys? What's going on? What can we expect?
So we are attending, some events in one vertical in the art space. We are also very busy building right now, alongside our research, and we are looking at Q3 to release an onboarding and COA tool. News of that to come out anytime soon. And yeah, we're still engaged with different events. We were at ETH Denver not long ago, Consensus, and the Paris Blockchain Summit. For future events, you can stay up to date with our events and plans by following Valence at Get Valence on Twitter.
Twitter Spaces are phenomenal. I absolutely love them. They're great town halls, really, really smart conversations happening there. I love it. So yeah, for our audience, go to the Valence website, check out the products. They're always looking for people to kind of help and join the development community. And we're excited to use your products in the near future. Especially the wallet. I'm really intrigued, and the markets, all of it actually, because you're hitting on, like, you got the trifecta, right? You've got these 3 core components that are kind of vital, and if you only have a wallet, you're going to go, well, why can't I do anything with this?
Yeah.
Except maybe flip some tokens or something like that. This is really exciting. I've personally enjoyed learning and researching Valence. I would suggest our audience do the same thing, because there's some really interesting things, whether you're, a CEO looking to do something really, really different, make a difference, or you're a developer looking for the next project. I would suggest looking out to them. And also, follow Lloyd on Twitter. He's a really interesting guy. And I would really enjoy having some more conversations with you down the road, Lloyd. And we thank you for being here. Anything else you want to share?
Not much more. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think, we could go on for another hour or more.
Absolutely.
You mentioned
And that's just not even talking about the music stuff, Lloyd.
No, absolutely. The only thing I'd say is, Valence is, we're just getting going. You can check us out online at getvalence.com or at getvalence on Twitter, as we said. You can learn more about our blockchain ecosystem, AliceNet, which is through our blockchain foundation partner, AliceNet, on Twitter, or AliceNet on Discord. And if you want to reach out to me, easiest way to get to me is on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Lloyd, thank you so much. Again, I enjoyed learning and enjoyed this discussion immensely. So thank you, and we'll be in touch for sure.